everyone. And today's episode, my guest is Elizabeth Lilly. And Elizabeth has an amazing story and a really great message to share with us. And her message is really that if you look for it, there is a gift in absolutely everything. And she's going to tell us about the situation that she was in that didn't seem to be a gift at the time, but how she decided to see it that way and to make different choices for herself that has led her to where she is today. So I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth, and she's going to tell you her story. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege and an honor to be here today. So lovely.
Thank you. And I know from what we've spoken about, so this wonderful, inspiring message you have that there's a gift in everything, and that's just such a wonderful way to see things. So I wonder if before we go back and have a look at who you were, if you can tell us a little bit about who you are, and then when we're talking about where you came from and the journey you've been on, people will understand the gap that you bridged. So who are you today?
Today I am happily married to the love of my life, the sweetest and most wonderful man that exists in the world, according to me.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm also, my journey has led me to reinvent myself, really, to become a new version of myself. Because through all the hardship that I'm going to tell you about in a second, I decided that I was going to find ways to become happy and ways to be able to cope with the things that are happening in life. Because back then, 20 years back in time when everything started, I didn't have any tools really to deal with it.
Right.
But that journey led me to learn emotional freedom technique and neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis to begin with for myself. But eventually I also became a practitioner so that I now can help transform other people's lives using these tools and help people to come over trauma themselves. Yeah. And that is so incredibly rewarding. Every time I get to help someone and see them go from darkness to that spark of hope and joy, I'm so grateful. I'm so very grateful for that gift. That is my life purpose, I think. So this hardship has given me so many gifts, really. It's given me a new identity. It's given me a new meaning of life, because I feel like I have a meaning to my life that is bigger than myself today. Just thanks to all this that has happened.
And I love the way that you've put that. And it's so important, because I think that so many women listening will be stuck. They're either stuck in an abusive situation now, or they're stuck with how the past has left them feeling. And this whole concept of reinventing, I mean, for those of us who've done it, we know that it's possible. We know that it's amazing, that it leads to abundance and joy and purpose and all the things that you were talking about. And I think it's so important for people to hear that this is possible, because we're kind of given the impression, especially by traditional medical practice, that it's not possible, that you can't overcome deep depression, you can't overcome anxiety. All you can do is learn to live with it, and see PTSD exactly the same. You must learn to live with and to manage your symptoms and not have too high expectations of any healing that you might be able to do. But for people like you, I love it that you show up in this way. And what we're saying, any of us on this podcast are saying, that's just not true. And you can totally reinvent who you are. And I loved that you used that word, reinvent. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I need to emphasize that even more, that it's entirely possible to overcome trauma. For example, this and difficult things that have happened. This technique that I'm working with is called emotional freedom technique. And it's been proven in scientific studies to lower the cortisol levels dramatically, and also release the fight, flight, and freeze response from the amygdala in the brain that is kicking in when we're in the trauma, and that is creating these fear programs that we have. And I always get so mad when I hear people say, well, you just have to learn to live with it. You just have to learn to live with a fear. You just have to learn to live with it. You're always going to have this, because it's just not true.
Yeah.
And even like phobias and fears with emotional freedom technique can be erased.
Uh-huh.
I had one coming to me with stage fright, and she'd been told that you just have to learn to live with it. And that's obviously not as severe as trauma and abuse, but 45 minutes later her stage fright was gone.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I can relate to that totally.
so it's not as easy to work with trauma and abuse, obviously, but it's just an interesting example of how we actually can take our lives into our own hands, so that there are methods to continue our lives being happy, to go back to, or go forward to the new version of us that is feeling okay.
And
There are methods.
clearly you're
True.
a testament to that, which is
I'm sorry.
You're a testament to that, which is just fantastic. So that's who you are, and obviously you've been through a process to do that. But who were you? Let's go there. Let's have a look at what happened. What situation were you in that you have overcome to become the person that you are today?
I can start with my dark night of the soul that I went through in about 20 years ago, when I lost almost everything humanly possible to lose within a few years.
Okay.
I became deeply depressed because I lost my mom to cancer, and I lost my older sister to cancer. I lost a childhood friend to suicide. And then one morning when I got out of bed and opened my bedroom door, I was met by a black wall of smoke coming towards me. So that day I lost everything I owned in a fire. I had to jump out the window to survive. Fortunately, it was on the first floor, but it was horrible. And then I had a very religious upbringing, so I was part of a religious organization. And when I realized that I couldn't stay there anymore, that it wasn't my truth, I lost everyone I owned. And no, not let's edit this. I lost everyone I knew and all my social connections, because we weren't really supposed to have friends outside of the congregation, and they weren't able to talk to me or even say hi to me on the street after I left.
Religious love can be very conditional, can't it? It's like we love you as long as you do exactly what we say, as long as you believe exactly what we believe. And once you make that clear that might not be for you, that's it. You're gone. Yeah, that must have been very hard. How old were you at that time?
I think I was 23, 24 around that time when I went through that process. And I also left my marriage at the time, because I'd gotten married at 18, because I couldn't be with my boyfriend if we weren't married. So, and I realized when I look back on that my self-esteem was really bad, because I'd been told during my upbringing, I've been told a lot of times that you shouldn't think too highly of yourself, and you shouldn't be proud. Pride comes before a fall, and things like that. So essentially, the belief that I found in myself when I started doing my work, my personal work, was that I was not important. I was not important, and I did not love myself at all. I didn't even like myself.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good illustration and an important point of how we are products of our upbringing and our environment, and the things that you were told you took on board. So rather than being encouraged to be the best version of yourself, and to be striving forward and to love yourself and to practice self-care and all those kind of things, look at what was fed into you and look at what it led to. And I think it's so important for anyone listening who can relate to this to understand that you're a product of your environment. Everything that you heard about yourself, everything you saw and experienced has led to you feeling as you feel today. And how you felt about yourself led to the choices you made as an adult. We don't leave them behind. Who we are as children is who we become as adults. So carry on. Yeah.
And that is a very important message as well, that we need, I'm going to get into my relationship and the choices that I made because of this program that I had as well. Because just as you say, we will never do or have anything more than we believe in our minds that we are worthy of having, being.
Yes, wonderful. I love that. Yeah.
And we will never have anything more than we believe is safe in our programs as well. So we need to start with that self-worthiness and to work with the fears that we have and the programs that we have, to erase our low self-esteem, to start loving ourselves, to start beginning to feel that we are worthy, and to start feeling safe, being loved, feeling safe, getting abundance and flow in our lives.
Sure.
And that starts with our subconscious mind, because that's where we have all our programs. 95% of our minds are subconscious, and still we do what it says to us every single time. We follow the subconscious mind.
Look, as a hypnotherapist, you're speaking to the converted, but so many people don't understand this. You know that it's the subconscious that is running the day to day. And this is why traditional talk therapy. It's so difficult to get a result with traditional talk therapy, because we're not dealing with the conscious mind. It's the subconscious that we need to look at. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But if I should get back to my story, I was severely depressed. I was deeply, deeply depressed at that time. I was suffering with horrible anxiety attacks. I had panic attacks. I was suicidal. And I even decided that I was going to end my life. But I believe that I was saved by a higher power at that time, because I got a voice in my head just screaming at me, this very traditional but still very powerful thing that many say, that it's not that I want to die, it's just that I don't have the strength to live. What the voice was saying in my head, is screaming at me. It's not that I want to die, it's just that I don't have the strength to live.
And again, you're saying some really powerful stuff here. And I think that there are going to be people listening to that are just going to relate to that they don't want to die, but they don't have the strength to live. I think that's such a powerful thing to say.
Yeah, and it was true. I realized that it was true. And since I'm a very practical person, I also realized that, okay, if the issue is that I don't have the strength to live, then it's actually a problem that can be solved. I can find tools to find the strength to live again. There has to be a way to find that strength to live. And that's when I decided that I wasn't going to take my life. I had actually started bleeding, cutting my wrists, but I managed to patch myself up and go to the hospital, because I decided that, okay, I'm going to find the strength to live, and to begin with, I need to survive, because I still had very bad suicidal thoughts. So I admitted myself to the hospital. I made sure that I got therapy and medications and everything that you're supposed to do if you're feeling really, really bad. If you're suicidal, the first thing you should do is reach out to someone who can help you. And if you don't have the strength to reach out to the doctor or a therapist, then reach out to a friend or a family member and tell them, I need help. Help me get that help. Because it's super important that you get qualified help if you are suicidal and if you suffer from clinical depression. It's really important. But after I went through treatment and therapy and was leaving the hospital, I started my life over again. But I had nothing. I had no money. I had a fold-out couch. That was what I owned, because my husband had, unfortunately, debt that he hadn't told me about. And he told me in the divorce that either you leave everything or you take half my debt. So I had nothing, and I knew no one. I had no friends. And because of my really bad self-esteem and these programs that we talked about, I made a choice to start dating a man that I knew wasn't right for me from the beginning.
And I love again that you've used the word choice, because sometimes we get stuck in blaming other things and we fail to take responsibility. And the most important thing I think anyone who is looking to make a change can do is to understand that they made choices, whatever the reasons were, they made choices, and they can make choices again. You choose. And I can see here how important it is that you saw that you made a choice. That was a bad one. And owning it was a bad one comes with huge growth and understanding. But I just want to emphasize that we are always working with choice. We always have choice. Children don't. Children don't. Adults do. As adults, we have choice and we choose. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, really, really important point. We are the ones with the power in our lives. It's an illusion that someone else has the power over us, because we can always make a new choice.
Yeah.
And also that we have that strength reserved within us. Even if I was super depressed, I was filled with anxiety, I had nothing, and I felt like I was completely broken, but I still managed to move to another town, to get an apartment, to apply to school, to get a job eventually, even though I thought I didn't have the strength to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had that strength reserve within me. And I believe that when we need that strength reserve, when everyone who's watching, if you feel like you're broken and you're broken down, you still have that strength reserve within you that you can access. And you can, but everything begins by deciding that I have the power over my life and I can do something about this.
Yeah.
Everything begins with that.
And we summarize that as well as telling people that everything you need is already within you. You just access it. Just understand that and realize it. Everything you need is already there. Yeah.
Definitely.
Super important.
And we have all the answers as well. I'm sorry.
We have all
the answers. We tend to, when we're in a difficult situation, we tend to look outside of ourselves for answers and for guidance. But what we really need to do is look inside of ourselves. What is it that I really want? What is it that I really need? If I loved myself, this is a super great exercise that you can do, either journaling or just ask yourself during the day. If I loved myself in this situation, what would I do for myself right now?
Right.
And even in different situations during the day, you can ask yourself, if I loved myself in this situation, what would I choose? What would I do?
Yeah.
Because if we are in a,
I think for some people, the concept of loving themselves from where they are, like they feel like they're in the depths of despair and they're more filled with self-loathing than love. So this concept of self-love is very, very difficult. So the other thing people can do, if they can't do this, if I loved myself, what could I do? The step back from that to get to that point is, why don't I love myself? If I don't love myself, why not?
But there is a kind of, that is super great as well. That is super great as well. But what is really cool about this thing about asking a question is that when you ask your mind a question, even if you don't really believe in it, that you love yourself, is that your mind will always come back with an answer.
Yes.
So asking a question to your mind, like, if I loved myself, what would I do? Will give you an answer.
Yes.
So that is kind of cool.
You might not like the answer, but it's given you that answer for a reason, you know. So
that's a way to play with getting into new choices. Like, even if you don't feel like I did not love myself, but I've been in these really deep, bad places in my life, and asking questions has always been a way to find more positivity.
Yeah.
Even if you're, so try that exercise.
My own journey started 10 years ago from a place of absolute self-loathing. Like you, it started with a near suicide. So anyone listening, like we've been there. I know what it is to just have no concept of loving yourself and why you should and what comes from it. So we've been there. We've done the journey. So, but your journey, sorry, we got off, but I think it was good, the stuff we got into. But you were talking about how you chose, and you said you knew right from the beginning that this relationship just wasn't right for you. So tell us about that, because that's amazing.
Yeah, to begin with, I met this guy at the psych ward at the hospital, which was my initial warning sign.
There's a red flag. Yes, okay.
And we very quickly moved in together. I think it was a couple of weeks or something like that after getting to know each other, and just kind of hit the ground running with a relationship. And he was the first warning signs that I got from him was that he very quickly got super jealous about everything.
Right.
I had like a male friend message me and ask me how I was doing, and he got completely mad and he practically told me that I could never have contact with that man again. So it was super jealous. Turned out that he was lying a lot. I noticed very quickly that he was making up stories and changing his stories and was very manipulative and very controlling. So, and because I wasn't really in a good place to begin with, I kind of didn't do anything about it. I didn't say, maybe I told him, well, you can't do this to me or something like that, but I never decided that this is not a relationship for me, or it's not okay that he's doing this to me and now I'm leaving. But I just stayed in the relationship. And basically I thought to myself, well, I don't have anything else. And he has good friends and he's got a family, and he was my social network, basically. And the one that I had.
It was a question of someone abusive is better than, and I'm taking it he was emotionally abusive, not physically abusive.
So it was not physically abusive, no.
Yeah, so someone emotionally abusive is better than no one. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation where it's just better than no one, or that's what they think at the time. Obviously, we know that that's not true, no. But yeah.
No. But I've always kind of thought that I was a strong person. I never thought that I was a weak person, or that and I know that I'm not. I know that I have a strong mind, and I have nowadays that I have my tools as well. I know that I can deal with practically everything that happens in my life. And I've always believed that I was strong. And I don't believe that you're a weak person if you end up in an abusive relationship and you get affected by that relationship. It isn't because there's something wrong with you, or because you are not a strong person, or because you are weak. It's simply not about that. But what happened to me, even though I'm kind of a clever cookie as well, I have a good head on my shoulders, so I've always done well, like in school and things like that. So logic, it's just when it comes to being repeatedly pushed down and being repeatedly trampled on emotionally, it just breaks you down gradually.
Yeah,
more and more breaks you down.
Well, and I think think an important part as well, isn't there? And you'll know this from the work that you do, that very often there's an underlying message, and it's often hidden in the subconscious, that you accept this because there's an underlying belief that this is what you deserve. Somehow you don't deserve better. So you accept it because you're also repeating a pattern from childhood. This guy wasn't treating you any different to how you had been treated anyway. So you're repeating a pattern. But I know I find a lot, there's this definite belief that this is what someone deserves. And that's a very hidden but very toxic and debilitating thought process to have in the background, especially when you don't know it's there.
Yeah. And we come back to that again. It's the subconscious programming, of course, that is causing this. And I was so mean to myself back then. I was super mean to myself, even though I had to say my childhood wasn't that bad. Although I had got that programming that you shouldn't think too highly of yourself and things like that. I was always loved during my childhood, and I was never abused, like that in my childhood. But still, I had this belief that I was not worthy. I was not worthy of love. I believed that I was not worthy of love. And this man eventually, he got meaner and meaner, and he would tell me things like, "You're so disgusting, I don't want to touch you. Can't even look at you because you're so disgusting," could tell me. And afterwards, I realized that these were things that I could have told myself, actually. When I got up and looked at myself in the mirror, I could say so many mean things like, "You're just so worthless. Why didn't you do better? You can't do anything right." I was like really an echo of his voice already inside of me. But the mean things he told me, I could just as well have told myself, because that was how bad I was feeling about myself.
Yeah.
I really believed it.
Well, the fact is, we are our own harshest critics. And I often say to people, you would never be friends with someone who speaks to you the way you speak to yourself. You would know that you don't want that person in your life, that they're no good for you, and yet you do it to yourself. And this is something you have to realize, because it's actually a huge root cause of depression. The mean things that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, our mean negative automated thoughts, really. We have these automated negative thoughts going on in our minds, and unless we do something about it, they will affect us, so that we feel bad. But once again, change starts from the inside. So my real transformation after I eventually got out of that relationship was that I started to transform the way I spoke to myself.
What made you get out? That's the interesting thing. Like, so many people are stuck in relationships and they don't get out. So they're probably going to be interested to hear, what was it? What was the point when you said, no more, I'm leaving? What's the catalyst?
Yeah. To begin with, I ended up in this relationship over 3 years, I think 3.5 years, from thinking that I'll just stay for a little while until my life has fallen into place and things like that. And during that time, well, I was so broken down that I trusted everything he said about me and what I'd done and things like that. And I didn't trust myself anymore. So one day he told me that, I've just been waiting for you to confess that you were unfaithful, because he always thought I was unfaithful, that I had an affair and things like that. And he went through all my contacts on my phone and had me tell him everything about them, if there was a name he didn't know, and everything like that. He was very, very paranoid all the time. So one day he told me that, I know that you were having an affair, that you had like a hookup with a guy 6 months ago, because one of my friends called me up and told me he saw you at the pub kissing someone else. And I've just been waiting for 6 months to hear you confess. And I was like, huh? How can I not remember kissing a guy at the pub? How can I not remember having an affair? That was my response. How can I not remember? I wonder who I had an affair with.
Wow.
It took me 3 days to realize that this event never happened.
Okay.
3 days to begin to trust myself. 3 days of wondering how I could not remember. Did I go out to the pub? Did I drink so much that I don't remember anything? But I never do that. It was so bizarre,
But look at the hold he had. Look at the influence he was, the strength that his words had for you to not just immediately reject it because you knew it wasn't true, but to just assume that it must be.
Yes, that was at the point I was at after 3 years. And he had been, he would put me down constantly. He could punish me if he didn't like the things I did. which he mostly didn't. I went on a trip that I was offered by a friend to a town in south of Sweden where I live. And he was so mad when I got home that he took all the money that we had for food that month and went out to the pub and drank it all up. And came home at 9 a.m. in the morning with some ridiculous story of having been out walking all night. So that was one reason why I decided that I was going to leave, because apparently he was the one having at least one affair or having at least one hookup with someone. He wasn't the one who was faithful to me. Mm-hmm. And then also this thing when he told me that I had been unfaithful, and I immediately trusted his words and not my own. I realized that I was really messed up from this situation.
Right.
That we realized that this is really not good, and this is not me. And just as you said, the power that he had over my mind at that time, it was surreal to me. It was unreal. So that's when I decided that I had to leave, that I couldn't stay in the relationship. But what really made me take the step eventually was that my period skipped a month. And I got so terrified. I just thought to myself, I cannot risk being pregnant with this man, because I cannot have a bond to this man for the rest of my life.
Right.
It's completely impossible for me to be connected to this man. And that's the day when I decided that I had to leave, that I had to get out. And told him that it was over.
And how did that go? Because a lot of people are very scared about, a lot of people will leave quietly. You don't tell their abuser that they are going to leave, or they're planning to leave, or they're terrified of what will happen if they do leave. So how did that go when you said that you were leaving?
Well, because he was a very proud person, he decided that it was a mutual decision.
Okay.
But afterwards, because he was not mentally well, obviously, he had a mental diagnosis. And afterwards, he started spreading lies about me, telling everyone that he had kicked me out because I had been unfaithful. But at the same time, he came back to me and begged me to come back.
Yeah.
And I know that, well, leaving is not easy, because even after I had broken up with him and left our mutual home, he started to visit all my friends whom he never wanted to visit when we were together, and started to ask questions about me and what I was doing and things like that. So it wasn't really easy to leave him. And he went to my brother, became friends with my brother, to be able to monitor me again. And I actually got nightmares. I was quite certain that he was driving around my house where I was living at the time as well. So I got really bad nightmares about him just finding me and trying to hurt me and things like that. So it wasn't really an easy breakup, but eventually he let up. He stopped doing that and went on with his life. But yeah, it wasn't easy, but it turned out well in the end for me. I know that is a difficult situation.
Clearly. But I think it's worth again saying that these are common fears that people have, these stalker type activities that can then go on, because what you're talking about is someone who is mentally unwell, and obviously they are an abuser who likes to be in control, and suddenly they've lost control. So it's like, what are their behaviors around that they're not rational? They're clearly not in control of their own thoughts and actions, and you just end up with these bizarre situations that, as you say, can be scary as well. So just anyone who is experiencing this, you're not alone. This happens.
No. And I know that my story isn't too bad, actually. I managed to get out of it, and I managed to rebuild myself afterwards as well. But I didn't really put the pieces of the puzzles together when it came to his diagnosis as well, until I was seated beside a psychotherapist who was retired, and I was seated beside him on a plane to Gran Canaria. That was during a 4-hour flight. And I hadn't planned on telling him anything about this, but doing his work, he started getting answers out of me and stories and things like that. And he said to me, "Wow, were you really with this guy 3.5 years? That's a long time to be in that kind of relationship," he said. And he explained to me, which I didn't know, that the particular type of diagnosis that this man had was related to, well, as he said, a tendency to bending the truth, to a tendency to be paranoid, to a tendency to be very jealous, and all of that. So
What was
if
his
I'd known that,
diagnosis? Just for people listening, they might know someone who has this diagnosis, or they're concerned about someone who's displaying these behaviors. What was his diagnosis? What should they expect? What should they be looking out for?
well, his diagnosis was bipolarity, but I'm sure he had something else as well. And I'm also sure that not everyone experiences the same symptoms if they are bipolar, of course.
Yeah.
So, as we say in Sweden, there are grades in hell. You know, there are.
It
I'm
sounds
sorry.
extreme. Sounds extreme for bipolar. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people who talk about people with bipolar, and they don't have those kind of tendencies.
No, exactly.
So
Exactly. But I
interesting.
also think that getting a mental diagnosis of any kind is very difficult.
Yes.
It's always a guesswork, I think. Are you depressed? Are you bipolar? Are you something else? It's just a label.
Well, we know at
So
the
that's
moment, don't we, that there are a lot of people who were diagnosed with bipolar, and those are now being overturned, and they're realizing that people actually have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the problem,
exactly.
and the problem, of course, is not only have they been taking medication for bipolar for years, in many cases that they don't have, but it means that their complex post-traumatic stress disorder has gone untreated. That's the big issue
Exactly.
with that. But that is
Exactly.
coming up a lot these days, a lot. So that might be
I,
useful information for people listening who are wondering, does someone really have bipolar? What's really going on here? Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, very commonly replacing a bipolar disorder these days. Yeah.
yeah. So don't take that too seriously if you feel like you don't have to explore experience those things that this man that I lived with had,
Yeah.
even if you get
Yeah.
that diagnosis.
Yeah.
So just know that. But I think if in case if he actually was bipolar, maybe he had the more extreme side of,
Okay.
of the symptoms or something like that.
Yeah, everything's a spectrum, as we know. So
Yeah.
where did you go from there? You got yourself free, which was amazing. What happened to you next?
What happened to me was that I made another choice. I made another decision. And that was that I will never have anyone treat me like this again.
Wonderful.
And I will find someone who respects me. I will find the love of my life. I will find a really, really good relationship. Because even my first marriage wasn't that great. He was also a very broken man who came from an abusive family himself. And he could be quite mean to me and put me down as well and tell me, of course you did this thing wrong. You always mess up things and things like that. So my two first long relationships weren't really super great. But I decided that this ends now. No one is treating me like that again. And I'm building myself up. And I got myself a small apartment in the center of town. I got involved in music again. I always loved music, so I got involved in a what's it called? An organization, like where we joined up to make music and to produce music and learn about music and things like that. And that's where I met a guy. And the first time was so weird, because the first time I saw him and spoke to him, I thought that I almost knew him from the moment I met him. I felt as if I knew him from before, although I've never met him before. And yeah, I really liked him. So eventually I got the courage to ask him out for a coffee.
Oh, okay.
and from that day we basically were a couple. And he was the sweetest and the kindest and the most remarkable man I had ever met. And I just knew that he was the one. And he treated me really, really nicely, really, really well. And if we ever argued or something like that, and he raised his voice, I just told him, you do not raise your voice to me. You do not treat me like this. And I kind of overreacted a little bit based on my previous experiences, because I was so adamant that no one would ever talk down to me, or no one would ever raise their voice to me. No one would ever treat me badly again. So, but that was kind of the gift that I got from the abusive relationship as well, that I decided that I'm worthy of being treated well. I'm worthy of having people respect me, listen to me. And yeah, that was kind of the pivot that I did when I left that relationship. And that
obviously around that, as from what you're saying, you put some really strong boundaries in place, which is absolutely great and was missing before. So can I ask you, what kind of work did you do? What kind of personal work? What was the therapy, the tools? What did you do to make that transition? What helped you realize your value and worth, and that you were worthy of respect and of being spoken to and being loved, and that you deserved love, all those good things that clearly came pouring into your life? What was the personal work that you did to make that happen?
Since when I decided that I was going to find ways to become happy again, I went to a coaching program after I'd finished therapy and medications and things like that for my depression. And during that year, it was a year-long program. And during that year, I got to explore my values. Mm-hmm. I got to learn the importance of our mindset, that when we have control over our mind, or methods to work with our minds, we can become truly limitless. And that was it was a very interesting theme day we had with a Buddhist monk one theme weekend. And he told us a story about his master, who had the world record of firewalking. And his master had been preparing for the event for days. He had been meditating and preparing his mind for the firewalk. And it was like this big production with Hollywood fans and measuring of the temperatures and everything like that. So he got up to the bed of coals that day when the world record was measured, and he was prepared, he was ready in his mind, and he walked, and he managed to get the world record of the firewalk. But then he was walking to the beginning again at the side of the bed of coals. And he didn't see the little piece of coal that had jumped out of the fire and was lying on the side of the firewalk. So he stepped on that, and he got third-degree burn wounds on his foot because he wasn't mentally prepared at that time. He had let go. He wasn't mentally prepared.
Right. Amazing.
So, and the Buddhist monk ended up with saying, and tonight you are going to walk on fire as well. But he said that you can't do it unless you are completely certain in your mind that you're going to be able to make it. You have to see yourself being there, having done it, having walked on the fire. You have to see yourself succeeding. You have to know in your heart that you're going to succeed, that the coals won't burn you. Otherwise, you will hurt yourself. So that night we went up to this big fire that the Buddhist monk and his companion had made, and we walked around the fire until they had prepared everything to the sound of the drum of a shaman. And I saw someone walk over the firebed, because I thought in my mind, I'm never going to do this. I can't do this. I can't. There's no chance in
And if you think
life that
you can't, for sure. Yeah.
And so I was walking there in a circle around this bit of fire, and then I saw someone else walk over, and suddenly I thought to myself, but hey, I've overcome this abusive relationship. I could actually leave it. I could rebuild my life. I could rebuild my life from depression, from having nothing. So of course I should be able to do this. And after a while, that notion that I am so strong that I can do this had been building up in my mind. So I knew I could do it. So I walked up to the firebed and I walked. And I got over to the other side and I didn't burn myself. And that's when I realized the extreme power that lies in your mind.
Yes.
We have that extreme power in our minds. That if we decide that we can do something, we can. If we decide that we can overcome something, we can overcome it. But it all starts with the mind. So decide that you're going to do the things that you want to do. If you want to leave an abusive relationship, decide that you can see yourself on the other side, because that's where transformation starts. So that was how I discovered the power of my mind.
That really is amazing, and it brings to mind for me the truth of one of the rules of the mind, that your mind reacts to the words and images that you feed it.
Yes, definitely.
We have absolute control of the thoughts that create the actions that create the results. But that must have been phenomenal for you. Like, I can't imagine how you would feel about yourself having done that. That's almost like the ultimate test, what happened from there? So this happened. This is how you got to the point, and then after that you started to do your music and met this guy and everything. So it was that experience that gave you everything that you needed to move forward.
I felt like I was on top of the world after I'd done the firewalk. I felt completely on top of the world. I felt like I could do anything.
And you could.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
Could.
Yeah.
So I got some tools from that year with a coach as well, to start working with the mean little guy that we have on our shoulder that is telling us all these horrible things that we say to ourselves. And I discovered a subconscious belief that I had when I had married my beautiful husband, and I was preparing my home for him to come home from work, and I was lighting candles, and I was fixing the cushions in the sofa, and I was folding the blankets and making dinner. And that's really when I discovered this deep underlying belief that I was not worthy. Because suddenly I asked myself, why don't I ever do this when I'm alone? I didn't light any candles when I was alone. I didn't set the table with pretty napkins or things like that. So I asked, why don't I ever do this for myself? And as we said, when you ask a question, you get an answer. And I got the answer instantly.
Yeah.
And it was because I am not important. And that's when I discovered this program, this subconscious program that I had gotten from my childhood, that was really the basis of all the choices that I made, the bad choices that I made with the relationship, and how I let him treat me back then. And once I had discovered this underlying subconscious belief, I heard it everywhere. I had a very straining job, but it wasn't that important because it was just me. I could buy an ugly sweater for €5 at the store because it wasn't that important what I wore, because it was just me.
Ah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was it wasn't that important what I ate because it was just me. If I gained weight or my health wasn't that important because it was just me. So it affected everything. That low self-esteem, that belief that I was not important, that I was not that worthy, it affected every single thing in my life. And changing that belief changed my entire life completely. And when I changed that belief, I went from having the ugly €5 sweater to, well, I did overcompensate. I admit. I went to having the Prada glasses and the Dolce & Gabbana jeans and the Armani jacket
Hey, because you
and
deserved it.
yeah, because I changed the belief from I'm not important to I'm worthy of the very best in life. And I did that with a tool where that I got from my coach, where I said no to that belief and very forcefully when it came up in my mind, and I changed it with this belief that I'm worthy of the very best in life. So every time I heard that voice, I'm not important, I said, no, that is not true. I'm worthy of everything that is the best in life. And
Yeah,
eventually that reprograms the limiting belief.
of course.
And that was how I started. And once I had changed that belief, I decided that I was worthy of getting an education. I was worthy of learning more amazing tools like emotional freedom technique that I work with now. I went on to become an NLP practitioner. I learned hypnosis, and I decided that I was going to train to become a life coach. So I spent 6 months in training to be able to become a life coach. And I decided that I was worthy of having a good education. I was worthy of having a good job. It wasn't just like the things. I was worthy of eating well. I was worthy of feeling good in my body. I was worthy of being healthy. So that changed everything for me, changing that one single limiting belief that I had in my subconscious mind. So that's the power of one belief. Can you imagine that?
Well, and what it absolutely highlights, there's a couple of things it highlights, but the the fact that the most important relationship you have in life is your relationship with yourself, because it affects absolutely everything, as you just said, as you have just beautifully illustrated. When you transformed your relationship with yourself, it affected absolutely everything else, which is,
Exactly.
yeah.
And it's even taken me from across a continent, because eventually I landed in that I don't really need the Armani jacket and the Dolce jeans and any like stuff like that. But I'm just as happy with a bag from H&M or Zara or things like that. It's
And
really
that,
not important.
and that's when you realize I'm enough and I don't need stuff. You know, at some
Exactly.
point we're filling ourselves up with things from outside of ourselves to fill a kind of void. But once we filled that void up with just the knowledge and the love of who we really are, it's like I don't need that stuff anymore. I'm totally complete within myself. Yeah.
Exactly. And what I landed in was that I'm worthy of living my dreams. I'm worthy of peace. I'm worthy of good relationships, and eventually I moved to the south of Spain to try to live my dream in the sun, because living in the north of Sweden is super dark and really cold, and I didn't feel good in the winters. So that was eventually the very best thing for me. This new life, this good relationships, good food, peace and quiet, and yeah, good people. People are the really the most important things in life, or it is the most important thing in life. Good relationships and love and being seen and being heard and being appreciated for who you are. It's really
Yeah.
the very best.
Yeah.
So that's where I landed in making one of my biggest dreams a reality from changing that one belief. Yeah.
So is that where you are now?
Yes, right now I am in Spain and we're in lockdown, so it's not the dream life right now, but
Okay.
it will end.
That
So
absolutely, and it's the same for everyone. That's the thing to realize. It's, there's so many people in this same situation. But look at the journey you've been on. Look at who you've become, and I think there is so much gold here for women and men. We, as women, we get so used to being abused by men that we forget that there are men out there with abuse stories as well.
yeah.
But you're the absolute epitome of how your external success depends on your internal transformation. And when you change yourself, you just change everything.
Everything changes from the inside out. So if you do one thing today, if you're listening, so try to change one limiting thought that you have, or one negative thought that you have, to a positive. Choose something else that you would like to think instead, and start reprogramming your mind. Because as we talked about before, we have these automated negative thoughts, these ants going through our minds in record speed, because our minds are so well trained to think those thoughts, so they have become automated. We don't even recognize that they're there anymore. They just zoom through our minds. And learning a new belief is like learning how to ride a bike. You have to practice and practice and practice, and eventually it will become easier. And now that you've practiced a lot with your bike, you just get up on it, and you ride your bike, and you don't even think about keeping your balance or how to steer or anything like that. You just do it because the knowledge has become automated after all that practice. So learning a new belief, learning to retrain a belief or a thought, is just like that. You just have to practice. You have to remind yourself over and over and over again, no, that's not true. I am worthy of being loved. I am worthy of being respected. I am worthy of everything that is good. And practice that. And eventually it will become automated as well. And you will have retrained your mind to a new belief. So that is an easy to use technique that you can use. Or my favorite technique, of course, is emotional freedom technique, because it's so quick to reprogram limiting subconscious beliefs as well. So that is also a super great tool.
Yeah, so for anyone listening, if they're inspired by what you've said, and if anyone wants to get in touch with you and find out more about this emotional freedom technique, more about you, the work that you do, and how you can help them, what's the best? I mean, we'll put all of your links in the show notes anyway, but for anyone listening, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I have a website that is elizabethlilly.com. That's Elizabeth with Z and H at the end, and Lilly is spelled Lily with one L. Nice. So elizabethlilly.com, and if this is okay, I have a free EFT guide on my website if anyone wants it. So you can start tapping away fears and limiting beliefs if you want to.
Brilliant.
So yeah, so that's a great way. And then I'm also on Facebook and on Instagram, of course, I can send you, I'm Elizabeth Lilly on Instagram as well. But I'll send you the links, but
we'll definitely
check out my web. Yeah.
We'll put the links up for you, and people can check you out, check out what you do, how you might be able to help them. And and thank you for your story. And I'm sure there's so much gold in there that will really, really help people. And I think it's important that we don't just tell our stories, but those of us that are, especially those of us that are therapists, that we do interject these parts of psychology, human thought processes, so that people actually understand why they are where they are, why things have happened to them. And in your case, it's very interesting to note that damage doesn't have to be on purpose. Your parents, you came from a loving home, and your parents did the best, what they thought was the best, and they had no idea of what they were doing to your self-esteem. And they would be horrified to think that you've been through all of this. And I think it's really important for us to understand that some of the damage that we suffer, it's a lot of it is done on purpose or by parents who are very neglectful, mean, cruel, all sorts of things. But some of it just comes from a lack of awareness.
Yes, definitely. So it can happen, and it's often so with religion. I think there is a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and maybe that is the issue with religion for many people who get who get limiting beliefs from a religious upbringing. That it's a lot of shame, it's a lot of guilt, a lot of time. So basically that can be an issue.
Sure. Well, as it clearly was for you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing so honestly. We make ourselves vulnerable and real and raw so that other people can learn from our experiences. And you've certainly done that. And I thank you very much for that, for sharing everything that you've shared. And I'm sure it's going to be so helpful to so many people.
Well, I think the only way that we can become really strong is that we share with each other, is that we dare to be vulnerable. Because I know that I was kind of hesitant to tell my story from the beginning when I was younger, but I did so at a party, I think, and told my story to my friends about how I was suicidal and almost died. And a couple of months later, a guy came up to me at another party, and he just, as soon as I walked in the door, he just looked at me and he aimed for me. I could see that he was coming for me, and he came and he reached out his hand to me and he said, "I just want to thank you because you shared your story at that party. I got the courage to get help when I got panic attacks.
Wow.
I couldn't go to the store because I got panic attacks, but because you shared your story, I got the courage to get help." So that is really the power of sharing our stories. That we can actually help someone else by just sharing our stories.
And so often we never know. Like if you hadn't met him again, you would not have known. And I think that we always know about a few people that we help because they come to us directly or we get told. But imagine the thousands of people that stories like this will help that we don't even know about. And that's the beauty of telling stories. And I always say, actually, there would be less abuse if we could tell our stories as they happen. How many people are caught up in emotional and physical and sexual abuse situations, even as adults, that they don't tell? I didn't tell my story for a long time. But imagine if instead of pretending that everything was fine, making sure everything looks okay to other people, imagine if we told the reality. If we all said what was really going on as it was happening, there would be like a minuscule amount of abuse compared to what there is now. But we don't. We keep it all in and we hide it because we feel guilty. We think it must be something to do with us. We think we're at fault or we'll get the blame or there must be something really wrong with me. So we don't.
Yeah, we feel ashamed. Yeah, I feel so ashamed that I'd let this guy treat me like that, that I'd let him break me down like that.
Yeah.
So that for me was a lot of shame involved in that.
Yeah. And it'll be wonderful when we get to the point where we're more open and instead of pretending, we say things as they are and we tell things as they are in the moment. That'll be wonderful. Because we really will see a lot less abuse then.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you have an amazing nugget that you would want to leave everyone with. Just one thing. I know you've already shared so much, so if it's all been said, then fine. But if you have one thing that you would like people to focus on.
Well, I would say you are so loved. You're put on this earth because you have a purpose on this earth. And that purpose can be to like you and I do, share our stories or grow from our stories so that we can be of help to others in this world. And you have a bigger purpose in your life that you are put on this earth to do. Remember that. Remember that you can do it. Remember that you have everything within you that you need. All the strength, all the answers, everything is within you. So if you and I manage to overcome really difficult things in our lives, then everyone can do it. Just decide to do it, because you can. You can make a fabulous, fantastic life for yourself.
Yeah, and that wonderful phrase that you started with, that there's a gift in absolutely everything if you choose to see it and choose to use it. That's
Yes.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing and your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been super great, and I really admire your initiative and your work. It's really, really.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Let's hope we can affect thousands of lives with what we do between us. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.